So recently, we have seen the polls of do you think it was right for the UK to leave the EU? And really, for the past three now, people coming out and saying, yes, it was wrong that for us to leave the EU. And it was all down to the fact that Leave promised everything. They ran such a wide campaign promising everything to everyone that we were going to stay in the single market and customs union, but somehow at the same time not follow the laws and cherry pick the parts that we did like and leave out the parts that we didn't like, while making our own rules, laws, and regulations free to diverge and enjoy the big benefits of global Britain. And of course, if you dared even point out that slightest bit of contradiction in just some of those phrases being, joined together, being in the single market and customs union, but also at the same time having the freedom to diverge, yeah, that wasn't going to fly. And hence why they had to talk down experts, saying people have had enough of experts uttered by the infamous Michael Gove at the time. And also you had a live TV broadcast of my favorite piece of like 2016 referendum media that ever existed, of Daniel Hannan, where someone from the Remain side said, look, a vote to leave would be a vote to leave the single market and customs union. To which Daniel Hannan turned around and said, no one is talking about leaving the single market and customs union. Only a fool would leave the single market and customs union. So a big part, as I have said, on our path to rejoining the EU is really to win over the people who voted leave. You've got the fishing industry, and I've said what a coup it would be if you could get like the fishing industry to be at the core of the rejoin movement, saying, yeah, we were lied to. You know what? We were better off back in the, the common fisheries policy. It was far better for us. What a coup that would be. So if we can achieve that, it would be fantastic. We've already got farmers really annoyed at the at the Conservative Party, and especially at the vote leave people, because the farmers said, well, okay, if we leave, what about our subsidies? To which the Leave response was, don't worry, not only will we replace them, but we'll make it even better for you. And of course, what have they done? They've done nothing. This new agricultural land management scheme doesn't really give them anything for growing food. It just makes them environmental wardens, and farmers do not want to be environmental wardens. The name is in the clue. They want to be farmers. So it is really, really important that we keep on, the gas pedal, calling out the lies, bringing out the facts, bringing out the truth of really what Brexit has done, and calling even back all the way to 2016 of all these promises that they had made in 2016 and bringing them forward, saying, you said this in 2016, it has not happened. It is on you. You said this. You said it would make Britain better. You said it would make Britain richer. That has not happened. And that is something we are driving home ever more increasingly. You can feel it. You can really feel it. And especially in this article we're going to go over today, it certainly is true here. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people, again, who do support the channel. Like I say, please do hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and one notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you link down below, as well as the Pony Club as well. You can join to help support the channel in that way. So, over we go today to the Eye with their piece on this, with it saying, it hasn't worked. The Leave voters who have changed their minds about Brexit. If Margaret Shepherd could cast her ballot again, she would not vote for Brexit. The 75-year-old from Northwich, Cheshire, who supported Leave in 2016, is not alone. She estimates that since the referendum, since the majority in her constituency voted to leave the EU, public opinion here has turned against Brexit. She said, I would say 75% of people who voted leave didn't think it's worked, or didn't think it has worked, Miss Shepherd tells the Eye. I think they would never have left. I think they've changed their minds. In Norwich, which sits in a constituency of the Weather Vale, the Vote Leave campaign won by 50.1%, the smallest margin anywhere in the country. Voters here were arguably the least enthusiastic about Brexit anywhere that voted to leave. But 6 years since the referendum, it now appears that Norwich has become even less enthusiastic. When I visited last week, several residents who voted in favour said they now regretted their decision. They blamed the Conservative governments for failing to make Brexit a success, but also admitted having failed to realise the consequences of the consequences in it in the first place. So there are two things here. First of all, this idea that, the Conservatives have failed to make Brexit a success. This is certainly something we have to sort of really move on, because Brexit was never, ever going to be a success. There was no way you could make Brexit a success. So even if you say, yeah, look, Brexit's entirely the Conservative fault, they couldn't make it a success. But at that point, you have to argue, well, what do you mean make it a success? Nigel Farage, we highly suspect the next general election is going to come back with a new political party trying to say, I am here to save Brexit because the Conservatives aren't, fulfilling their mandate to sort of, make Brexit a success, whatever slogan he chooses to go with. But anyway, back to it. Mrs. Shepherd said that her and her friend, Margaret Witherford, also 76, who both voted to leave the EU, Miss Shepherd says that she did so because she was concerned about immigration and the strains on public services, including schools and the NHS. However, she admits that Brexit has, quote, not made a difference. Mrs. Wentworth agrees, adding it's probably made it worse. Mrs. Shepherd says she would not vote to leave if I had my time again. She thinks that others feel the same because they have now seen both sides of the coin, she says. I don't think if I had my time to think about it in 2016, everyone thought coming out of the EU will be great. We'll be running it ourselves. We will be self-sufficient, but we're not. Mrs. Wentworth said that Brexit had really a big impact, but mostly negative. You can't think of any positives. Neither holds out much hope for Labour or the Conservatives of improving the situation. But Miss Shepherd did add, I hope there is a solution for future generations. Alfred Solner, 73, a retired funeral director and bus driver, told the Eye that he voted for Brexit because of his concerns about immigration and a desire to have a greater control over the country's laws. However, he does not believe that Brexit has delivered on either of these issues. Again, the whole thing about immigration and the laws. Immigration was better because we were in agreements, the Belfast Agreement, which allowed us to actually help control a lot more of these small boats. We could do a lot more about it. We can't now. We're not in the EU. We're not in those agreements. But anyway, back to it. He says, I don't think the politicians know what's going on, Mr. Solinger says. They're not doing what they said they'd do. They've been too much arguing about each other. That's the problem. They can't agree on anything. I don't think being part of the EU was the problem. Well, at least that's starting to sink in because it's true. A lot of the problems politicians, and especially the Brexiteers, would love to just go back and start blaming the EU for being the root cause of all these problems. But most of the problems that people were talking about in 2016 were a direct result of Tory austerity, poor Tory mismanagement. That was the problem that we were facing. It was the Tories, but they love to just go and blame the EU, and the right-wing press love to jump on that bandwagon as well. It's all the EU's fault. But now we're out of the EU. You can't blame the EU. Oh, so whose fault is it? Well, clearly it must be the politicians. So at least that's starting to sink in. I'm glad about that a bit. But back to it. Mr. Solinger says that if he were asked again, he would vote to stay in the EU, and he thinks a lot of people would do the same. Although he used to be a committed Labour voter, he has now switched to the Conservatives and wishes that the party had not forced out Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Now he feels distrustful of all politicians. No one cares about us working class people, he adds. Well, Boris Johnson certainly didn't, but that's a conversation for another time. Rebecca Chapman, 29, who works in the veterinarian business, did not vote in the 2016 referendum, but wishes that Britain could go back to being part of the EU. She regularly travels with her family to Ireland with their dogs, and Brexit has made it much more difficult and expensive, saying it's £200 for the health certificate for a dog each time. Mrs. Chapman told the Eye, but before you even get a passport that lasted 3 years for about £80. I worked with vets there a lot, and a lot of people are unhappy about it, especially people who travel more than we do or have houses abroad. I think when it changed, people were shocked about the price. Mrs. Chapman says that there is also a lot more checks at the border in Dublin when crossing back into the UK by ferry. Before, we used to go there and never really checked us in our van. She said, now they're very strict. You kind of took it for granted. As well as being obviously the year of the Brexit vote in 2016 was the year, of course, Brandon Quay. A huge retail and leisure development that dominated the town centre arrived in Norwich, a multi-million-pound project which required extensive work to stabilise abandoned salt mines underground and was even part funded by the European Regional Development Fund. However, although there is an Asda supermarket and an Odeon cinema, a handful of restaurants, the council has struggled to keep its units full amid the economic conditions. The independent traders in the town are also struggling. Phil Bauer, who runs the Norwich Art Shop, says that the headwinds are changing. Consumer behaviour and COVID-19 pandemic have not been helped by Brexit. I've probably lost about 15 to 20% of my overseas customers now, he told the Eye. There's only a bit in Ireland. Mr. Bauer, 57, who blames the increased bureaucracy for hampering businesses and wanted to sell into the EU. At the end of the day, you're taking goods across a same bit of water, the same bit of land. Prior to the Brexit, this passed without fear or favour. Now, all of a sudden, the legislation says you need A, B, and C to do it. It makes no sense, he said. Well, actually, it does, because that was the law. That's what you have to do. But back to it. Mr. Bauer, who once stood as a Green Party councillor, was never in favour of Brexit and describes it as a catastrophic error. With polling now suggesting the potential Labour government at the next general election, he would like the party to be clear about where it stands. I would really like there to be a bit more original thinking and a bit less of the populists or what they perceive to be the populist view, because that's dangerous, he says. I think there needs to be some honesty, and I don't know if we'd recognised honesty if it jumped up and bit us in the face. So, yeah, this to be honest is good. Like I say, we need to see certainly more of this and this sort of change in direction. And this change in direction is good because we need this momentum. We need people to start really recognizing and having that conversation that Brexit was bad and that it hasn't really worked. And that, we also need to really start adding into the conversation that Brexit was never going to work. This idea that Liz Truss had, that Boris Johnson had, that Nigel Farage is probably going to come back and say that the Tories are squandering the benefits of Brexit. Well, it's not like Farage has come forward and said, well, actually, these are the benefits of Brexit. This is what you could do. But yeah, it's good. It's a step in the right direction. It is a massive step in the right direction. And I would not be surprised if we see more and more of this and momentum just build eventually. And like I say, as always, this was going to be our path back. It's, it's what we always predicted, what we said would happen, and it is happening slowly but surely. So this is good that public opinion has very solidly started to turn against Brexit. And even the Brexiteers are starting to panic and know that they've lost. So this is good. This is really a good step in the right direction. I cannot deny that. So As always, guys, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a rotation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.